In today's world, friendship is seen as proof of worth. We are told that the number of people around us reflects the quality of our life, but reality is far more complex. There are people who walk through life without friends, not because they are incapable of love or connection, but because life shaped them differently. Their solitude is not necessarily a weakness. Sometimes it is a shield, sometimes a scar, and sometimes a conscious choice carved from experience, observation, and introspection. People with no friends are often misunderstood. Society assumes they are lonely, broken, or unworthy. Yet many of them are deeply introspective. They trust themselves more than noise. They value peace over superficial company, and they seek meaning rather than popularity. These individuals may have experienced betrayal, disappointment, rejection, or emotional exhaustion that taught them one truth: not everyone who smiles is loyal, not everyone who stays cares, and not every connection brings warmth. Some carry wounds from childhood, bullied, misunderstood, or never truly seen. They learned early that isolation was safer than vulnerability. Others are simply different thinkers, philosophical, introverted, analytical, or creative souls who struggle to bond over shallow topics and forced social rituals. Their silence is not emptiness, but depth waiting for the right listener. But let us be honest, solitude can also be heavy. People without friends often battle internal storms alone. There are nights when the world feels too quiet, mornings when the absence of a good morning echoes loudly. They develop self-reliance, but sometimes they crave the warmth of being understood, the comfort of being known. They build strong minds because they must, and strong hearts because they have no arms to fall into. Yet, in this loneliness, many of them grow wise. They learn observation, resilience, emotional independence, and self-awareness. They develop inner strength that others envy. And when, or if they choose connection, they do not choose lightly. They form bonds rooted in authenticity, not convenience, loyalty, not entertainment, mutual growth, not shallow interaction. So here is the truth: having no friends does not define your worth. It does not make you less human, less capable, or less deserving. Sometimes solitude is a phase of healing. Sometimes it is self-protection. Sometimes it is simply who you are, someone who walks alone not by weakness, but by choice, awareness, or circumstance. And in that silence, there is power. For the person who learns to stand alone becomes someone who cannot be easily shaken. And when a soul like that finally lets someone in, that friendship becomes sacred, rare, deep, unbreakable. Many people who have no friends are not lacking in social ability, they are choosing peace over noise. In a world obsessed with constant interaction, they are the quiet ones who prefer depth to chatter, purpose to distraction, and authenticity to performance. They do not escape people because they fear them. They withdraw because they feel too deeply, observe too sharply, and refuse to dilute their inner world for surface-level companionship. They walk away from crowds not due to weakness, but because they refuse to sacrifice their emotional clarity for temporary company. For them, silence is not loneliness, it is a sanctuary. In solitude, they hear themselves think. They breathe without pressure. They exist without the need to impress. They find richness in things others overlook: the sound of quiet mornings, the warmth of sunlight in a room, the comfort of their own thoughts, the beauty of learning and reflection. They understand that being surrounded by bodies does not always mean being surrounded by souls, and so they choose the rare comfort of being alone over the exhausting burden of pretending. Society often assumes that solitude equals sadness. But these individuals know that false friendships can be far more painful than empty rooms. They have watched the world chase popularity at the cost of peace, posting smiles while feeling empty inside, collecting acquaintances instead of trust, seeking validation instead of truth. They refuse to live that way. Their self-respect does not allow them to settle for connection that feels hollow or relationships built on convenience. They would rather sit with themselves than sit with those who do not see them. This choice, however, is not without struggle. Peace can sometimes feel heavy when the world celebrates noise. There are moments when even the strongest solitary soul feels the ache of having no one to call at midnight, no shared laughter across a table, no comforting voice after a storm. But they bear this weight with dignity because they know their solitude has meaning. It is not abandonment by the world, but liberation from it. It is not that they do not desire connection, they simply refuse distortion masquerading as friendship. Their solitude is a filter. It removes the unnecessary, the insincere, the temporary. It sharpens them. It makes them emotionally independent, mentally resilient, spiritually grounded. When someone earns their presence, that person receives not just a companion, but a loyal heart, a thoughtful mind, and a soul that has been tempered by silence. These individuals love quietly but fiercely. They trust slowly but wholly. They give rarely but deeply. To choose peace over noise, depth over shallow belonging, and self-awareness over social approval, this is not isolation. It is strength. And if someday they welcome another into their world, that connection will not be casual, it will be meaningful, rare, and real. Their solitude is not a prison, it is preparation, it is protection. It is the mark of someone who knows that true companionship is not measured by the number of people around you, but by the truth that you never betrayed yourself just to feel less alone. There are people who walk through life without friends, not because they lack kindness or the ability to connect, but because they carry wounds, deep ones, often invisible to the world. These wounds are not always dramatic. Sometimes they are small scars left by moments most people would forget. But the heart remembers what the mind tries to dismiss. Betrayal from someone once trusted, abandonment from someone once loved, humiliation by someone once admired. Experiences like these do not simply fade. They change a person. They make the soul cautious, the emotions guarded, and the mind skeptical of promises and smiles. When someone has been repeatedly hurt by those they welcomed into their world, they learn a painful truth early. Not everyone who approaches you comes with good intentions, and not everyone who stays deserves a place in your life. They discover that loyalty is rare, trust is fragile, and vulnerability is a currency far too expensive to spend freely. So, they withdraw not to punish the world, but to protect themselves. They build walls not to keep connection away, but to keep their heart from shattering again. Eventually, solitude becomes safer than company. They learn that a silent room hurts less than a broken trust. And though they may miss companionship, they do not miss the anxiety of wondering who will disappoint them next. Their loneliness becomes a shield, something they hold close, something familiar, a space where disappointment cannot penetrate. They begin to rely only on themselves because others have shown them that love can turn sharp, promises can dissolve, and closeness can wound. This does not mean they have given up on people entirely. Deep down, they still long for genuine connection, one built on sincerity, patience, and honesty, but they refuse to settle anymore. They have paid the emotional price of believing too quickly and trusting too easily, and now they value their peace more than fleeting company. If someone wants a place in their life, they must earn it slowly, consistently, and sincerely. They must show they are not like those who left scars behind. These individuals may appear distant or cold, but beneath that protective layer is someone who once loved deeply, perhaps too deeply. Someone who once hoped fully. Someone who once believed unquestioningly. Their isolation is proof not of emotional emptiness, but of emotional history. People who have been broken do not stop feeling, they start feeling more carefully. And here is the truth few understand. Those who have suffered relational wounds often become the most loyal friends, the most understanding partners, and the most compassionate souls. If they allow themselves to trust again. Because they know the cost of hurt, they cherish sincerity. Because they know what betrayal feels like, they honor loyalty. Because they know silence, they value presence. Their solitude is not the absence of love, It is the aftermath of loving without armor and learning the price of vulnerability. In time, those who heal from such pain rise not as bitter souls, but as wise ones capable of love deeper than most will ever know, but unwilling to waste it on hearts not deserving of their own. Some people have no friends not because they are antisocial, but because their mind operates on a different frequency. They are deep thinkers, individuals who cannot thrive in superficial interactions or meaningless conversations. While many find comfort in small talk, gossip, and social rituals, these individuals crave depth, conversations that reveal character, silence that feels peaceful, companionship grounded in understanding rather than convenience. They are not dismissing others, they are seeking a rare kind of connection that resonates with their inner world. Their thoughts are vast and layered. They analyze, observe, and reflect before they speak. They notice subtle emotions, hidden motives, and unspoken truths. In a society where fast talking often masquerades as intelligence and loud presence passes for confidence, deep thinkers can feel alien. They do not blend in because they cannot pretend. When others gather to discuss trends or social drama, they drift toward philosophy, meaning, psychology, purpose, and human behavior. This difference often isolates them, not by force, but by nature. People may see them as aloof or distant, but the truth is they simply cannot fake interest in what does not feed their mind or soul. They are not cold, they are selective. Their silence is not emptiness, it is depth. They speak when words matter, not when silence is more honest, and because genuinely meaningful conversation is rare, so are the individuals who can truly connect with them. Many deep thinkers have rich internal lives. They can spend hours alone, exploring thoughts, the way others scroll through screens. They do not fear solitude. They use it to understand themselves and the world. Without constant social interaction, they observe patterns, reflect on emotions, build self-awareness, and cultivate inner resilience. This introspection makes them wise, but it also distances them from a culture obsessed with constant stimulation and instant gratification. Often, their standards for emotional and intellectual connection are high not because they feel superior, but because they have felt the emptiness of shallow belonging. They would rather have one conversation that feels like truth than 1,000 interactions that feel like noise. They are loyal to authenticity and allergic to pretense, and while this makes their social circle small, it also makes it meaningful. There is a quiet beauty in such souls. They walk alone at times, yes, but they walk with purpose. They observe life from angles others miss. They think before they trust, feel before they speak, choose before they attach. Their solitude is not a weakness, it is a form of emotional intelligence. And when they do let someone in, that person experiences a depth, loyalty, and understanding that is rare in this world. To be a deep thinker often means to stand apart, but it also means to see life more clearly than those who rush through it. And while the world may not always understand them, deep thinkers carry a truth most never learn. The mind is a precious sanctuary, and not everyone deserves access to it. Some people end up with no friends because, from an early age, they were misunderstood, not seen for who they truly were, not heard when they spoke, not accepted in their natural form. Childhood is where the architecture of belonging is built. It is where we learn whether the world welcomes us or wounds us. For many who grow up friendless, their earliest encounters with people taught them caution instead of comfort. They were labeled different, quiet, sensitive, or strange. And instead of being embraced, they were pushed to the edges not because they lacked value, but because they did not fit the mold others wanted them to occupy. A child who feels unseen eventually learns to see themselves instead. They develop inner worlds rich with imagination, thought, observation, and resilience. They learn self-soothing, self-reliance, and emotional independence long before their peers. While other children formed cliques and friendships through shared trends or childish competition, These individuals learned to rely on their own company. Their solitude was not chosen at first, it was the result of not being understood. But over time, it became a place where they felt safe, where they did not have to shrink or stretch themselves to fit in. Being misunderstood shapes a person. It teaches them that not every room deserves their presence, not every voice deserves their truth, and not every group deserves their belonging. It makes them observers instead of participants, thinkers instead of performers. They watch how people behave, how quickly loyalty dissolves, how easily cruelty hides behind a smile. They grow cautious not out of bitterness, but out of experience. As adults, these individuals carry the habits built in childhood: self-reliance, introspection, emotional armor. They do not chase approval because they learned early that approval can be fickle. They do not force friendships because they know forced connection is fragile connection. They value sincerity over social applause, depth over popularity, and truth over belonging. Yet this kind of upbringing has a dual edge. On one side, it creates strong, self-sufficient souls who do not crumble in solitude, people who can stand alone without collapsing. On the other side, it leaves traces of longing, a quiet ache for someone who finally understands them, someone who sees them without needing explanation, someone who listens without judgment. They do not need crowds, they simply wish that somewhere there was at least one person who speaks the same emotional language. But here is the powerful part. Being misunderstood does not make them weak, it makes them rare. Their sensitivity becomes intuition. Their loneliness becomes insight. Their early struggles with belonging turn them into individuals who do not settle for shallow connection or conditional acceptance. When they find people who understand them, if they choose to open their heart again, the bond will be profound, honest, and unbreakable. Because those who grow up unseen eventually learn the greatest truth. The world's failure to recognize your value does not diminish it. It only sharpens your awareness of who truly deserves access to your inner world. Some people have no friends because they have built a level of emotional and mental independence that most never reach. This independence is not born out of arrogance, it is born out of necessity, experience, and growth. When someone learns to think for themselves, comfort themselves, and motivate themselves, they realize they do not need constant companionship to validate their worth or existence. They live in a world where their mind is their home, and their inner voice is louder than the noise outside. They are not cold, they are self-sufficient. They have learned to meet their own emotional needs, and that level of strength often intimidates others. In a world where many rely on others to distract them from their thoughts, these individuals walk toward their thoughts instead of away from them. They do not fear their inner world, they explore it. They find clarity in solitude and direction in silence. They do not chase approval, they approve of themselves. They do not beg for empathy, they understand themselves. They do not wait for someone to rescue them, they learned long ago how to stand without support. And because they do not rely on anyone else to define their happiness, they are often misread as detached or unfeeling. But in truth, they simply do not want to give their power away. The irony is, emotional independence should be admired, but instead it isolates. Many people form friendships not from genuine connection, but from shared insecurity, codependence, and the fear of solitude. When someone does not need others in that way, they disrupt the social pattern. They do not cling, they do not seek validation, they do not play emotional games. Their strength exposes the emotional dependency others hide behind social interaction. And so, people mistake independence for rejection, not realizing that a person who can be alone is often the most loyal companion once they choose connection. However, this path has a quiet difficulty. When you learn to rely only on yourself, it becomes harder to let others in. Trust becomes a deliberate act, vulnerability becomes a choice, and dependence feels foreign. They may yearn for companionship at times, but not the kind filled with emotional burden or emotional neediness. They want a connection where two strong minds walk together, not one leaning on the other out of fear. Until they find that, they walk alone not because they must, but because they refuse to settle. Their independence is not a wall, it is a foundation. It is proof of battles fought in silence, nights spent thinking instead of running, strength earned through personal storms. They know who they are when no one is watching, and that is a power few possess. When they eventually allow someone into their life, it is not out of need but out of choice, and that makes their presence rare, precious, and deeply sincere. These individuals do not avoid friendship, they honor it. And they will not share their life with someone who cannot stand tall beside them. For some people who have no friends, social exhaustion is not a sign of weakness. It's the natural response of a mind that feels deeply and processes intensely. These individuals often experience the world on a more sensitive emotional frequency. They don't get drained because they dislike people. They get drained because they absorb too much from human interaction. Every conversation, every expression, every tone carries weight. Their brain isn't merely socializing, it's analyzing, empathizing, and assessing all at once. And that level of mental engagement can become overwhelming. So solitude becomes not an escape from others, but a recovery space for themselves. Many of these individuals have a strong internal world that constantly runs beneath the surface. Their thoughts are loud. Their reflections are constant. Their inner dialogue never stops. When most people relax after a social event, they are processing. Did I say the right thing? Why did that person look sad? Was I understood correctly? Did my joke land wrong? They replay moments, dissect behaviors, and worry deeply about impressions and emotional energy. Over time, this emotional processing takes a toll, leading them to choose isolation, not because they fear people, but because they need peace. There is also a psychological pattern here. People with overactive emotional awareness often become protectors of their own peace. If they grew up in environments where emotional energy was unpredictable, where they had to watch others' moods or manage tension, they develop a heightened internal radar. Social situations then feel like emotional missions. They monitor everything from facial expressions to tone shifts, and when your mind constantly works like that, solitude becomes therapeutic. Avoiding friends isn't about loneliness, it's about mental survival. Interestingly, many emotionally drained individuals are not weak. They are strong beyond measure. They have held emotions for others, been the listener, the helper, the one who understands. And when life drains them, they withdraw not to avoid love, but to rebuild strength. They retreat like warriors returning from battle, not hermits avoiding the world. Unfortunately, society often misunderstands this. People label them antisocial, cold, or indifferent. But truthfully, they are some of the most emotionally intelligent personalities. You simply see them in their downtime, not in their full power. And here's the paradox. The same emotional depth that drains them also gives them the capacity for meaningful, loyal, profound bonds. Just not with many people, because they don't want shallow friendships. They crave honesty, emotional safety, spiritual connection. They do not fear connection. They fear empty connection . So if you are someone who has no friends because your emotional energy is fragile, understand this: there is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You simply operate on a deeper emotional wavelength than most. Your solitude is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that your soul values truth, peace, and emotional clarity. When the right people enter your life, people who respect your internal space and don't exhaust your emotional energy, you won't hide. You will open, you will flourish, and your presence will feel like home. Until then, there is strength in your quiet and healing in your solitude. For some people who live with no friends, their journey is not defined by failure but by transformation. Over time, they realize something profound. Solitude is not loneliness, it is alignment. At first, they may feel disconnected, lost between wanting companionship and wanting peace. But slowly, they begin to recognize that isolation has given them a gift many never receive, the opportunity to meet themselves. When life becomes quiet, the inner voice becomes loud. And in that silence, they discover who they really are without the noise of expectations, judgment, or pressure to perform socially. This awakening doesn't come from running away from others. It comes from returning to oneself. People who walk life alone often develop a deep self-reliance that becomes their greatest asset. They don't wait for validation or approval. They learn to think for themselves, choose for themselves, build dreams without applause, and survive without external support. What others call loneliness, they turn into discipline. What others use friends for motivation, guidance, confidence, they learn to generate internally. This creates a kind of internal strength that isn't loud but unshakable. When you spend time without external emotional crutches, you learn to carry your world with your own hands, and that makes you powerful in a quiet, unspoken way. However, this shift isn't only about strength. It's also about standards. People who have walked alone develop clarity about relationships. They stop accepting half-effort friendships and superficial bonds. They would rather sit alone at a table than sit with people who drain their energy or misunderstand their soul. They have tasted peace, and once you taste peace, noise becomes unbearable. So when they eventually choose friends, they don't choose based on convenience or societal pressure. They choose based on energy, values, integrity, depth, and authenticity. They understand that having one real connection is better than 100 hollow ones. Eventually, this solitude shapes them into individuals who attract not crowds, but meaningful souls, because solitude gives birth to self-worth, and self-worth changes the type of relationships a person tolerates. It is not that they do not need anyone, it's that they no longer need just anyone. When the right energy meets them, they recognize it instantly, not because they are desperate for connection, but because they have learned to love life even without it. That is true independence, not rejecting people, but no longer depending on them to feel whole. So to the person with no friends right now, understand that this chapter is not a punishment, it is preparation. You are becoming someone who cannot be easily influenced, fooled, or lost. Someone who will love deeply, choose wisely, and stand firmly. One day, the right people will enter your life, and you will not cling to them out of loneliness. You will welcome them out of fullness. Until then, walk proudly. Your silence is shaping you, your solitude is teaching you, and your future connections will be richer because of the roads you walked alone.